Hello everyone, so the Keezer build is finally finished. It's all in place, got a few beers in there that have carbed up. Everything's working as I wanted it. Had a few little tweaks I had to make before I was happy with how it was all working, but I'm pretty much there now, and really I just need to brew more beers so that I can get it with all 4 taps working. I've got 3 going at the moment, another beer in there that's just conditioning, so hopefully for Christmas and New Year's I'll have 4 beers on the go, and I've got a amber ale as well, which is fermenting out at the moment. So without further ado, let's get a pint off of this and you can see it in action. There we go folks, pint of Kolsch, cheers. So I'm just going to use this video to recap a few of the elements of the build and show you it all in its fully functioning state, and for those of you that haven't watched the previous videos, it kind of means that you don't have to necessarily go back and watch all of those unless you want to see exactly how it was all done. But we'll start off with the beer that's just come off of it. So that was the first one that I had off of the Keezer. I've obviously had a few tasters prior to this one to get it all working properly and so on, but it's a Kolsch from Mandarina Bavaria. It's come out quite nicely. Needed to put a bit more of the Mandarina Bavaria hops in, I think, to get the mandarin flavour that you're supposed to get off of those, but it's a decent enough beer. Tastes pretty much like a traditional Kolsch, so I think I'm getting more of the noble hop elements from those hops and the fruity flavours, to be honest. But it's very easy drinking, it's carbed up beautifully, and as you can see it's holding a really nice head as well on that beer. So I've been moving the Keezer around a lot because I've been in and out of it, fiddling about with a few things that I'll talk to you about in a bit, but despite that it's still clearing up reasonably nicely. It's got a little bit of a haze to it still, but I find the Kolsch yeast, this was the CML Kolsch yeast, is fairly loose, so it takes a little while to settle out, but that's looking pretty good so far. So yeah, beer's coming out in good condition. The pour is a little bit on the slow side, but I think for particularly this kind of beer where it is fairly well carbonated, it's obviously better to have it a bit slower and not you know, just giving you a cup full of foam at the end of it. But I think for maybe beers that I'm serving on a slightly lower carbonation level, I could potentially shorten the beer lines a little bit. So I've got about 5 foot of 3/16 beer line there. I think I could shorten those and maybe then you'd make more use of the flow controls on the taps, because at the moment the flow controls pretty much just kind of cut it off to a real trickle at the moment. So I think I could start off with more pressure through the lines and then use the flow controls to tweak that for the different carbonation levels. But that's not urgent, it works perfectly well as it is at the moment, and this is on a fairly I've reduced the pressure as well on that already, so it's not pushing it through as hard as it could be. So yeah, you can also see the backlight on here. I'll bring you in a little bit closer so you can see that. So yeah, in one of the previous videos it showed me fitting that. I've got it on a kind of colour fade setting at the moment. It doesn't show up as well with the fluorescent lights on, but if we knock those off you can see the full effect. So it's just doing a kind of colour fade thing at the moment. It's got a few different modes on there, so you can just have single colour backlight like this. I think I like the blues and the greens probably the best, and it just, yeah, I think adds a nice little touch to it, makes it look pretty cool with that lighting on. Obviously I'm not sat here in the dark with it like that, but it's just to show you the kind of full effect there. You can also have it on the, lost the button, colour changing modes of various kinds, and there's a speed control on there as well and brightness control for the single colours. So yeah, don't really want to leave it on anything like that, because if you've got any kind of photosensitive condition, that will probably trigger you at some point. But yeah, as you can see, you can slow it right down and then change the mode. So I prefer the one which is just a kind of slow colour fade. Yeah, that's the one. Whoa, and then the lights are back on. So let's talk about the final finish on here. I'm really happy with how that all came out. The wood is stained and then epoxy, sorry, not epoxy, polyurethane varnish over the top of that. It is pretty difficult getting a nice smooth finish with polyurethane, but if you take your time, do several coats and lots of sanding in between, you can get a real nice kind of glassy effect on the top of it. Now, one thing I did realise, having done all of that and the epoxy top, is that I could probably have just used more epoxy and had epoxy over the top of the wood as well, which would have probably made a really nice kind of seamless effect between the inner part here with the beer mats and the wood on the outside. But on the flip side of that, it would have been a lot more messy. I'd have needed more epoxy, which is very expensive, and yeah, more potential for it to go wrong, I think, if I was doing it that way. So happy with the way I did it, but there was a alternative solution, I think, to that. The epoxy finished really well. There's only a couple of places where the odd bubble snuck through, so I think if it will focus, no, anyway, you'll have to take my word for it. There's a tiny bubble on this one here. There's another one over here just on Timmy's mat as well. You can see that one a bit more closely. So yeah, I could have watched it for a little bit longer just to eliminate those last couple of bubbles that popped out. So this brand is supposed to drive all of the air bubbles out automatically. I don't think it entirely lives up to that, as you can see, but on the whole, it's pretty much bubble free. Those are the only two that I've spotted on the whole thing. The other issue, which I talked about a lot in the other videos, was this kind of staining around the edge of some of the lighter mats where the epoxy kind of soaked in. So I did my best to try and counteract that with the plastic coating and PVA around the outside. It's the only thing that kind of annoys me really about this, because it didn't quite, you know, obviously it's slightly spoilt the finish on those mats, but I think it still looks really good. I'm happy with it overall. That's just the one thing that bugs me slightly, because first of all, I wish I'd fully tested the finish beforehand, you know, rather than just going straight into it and assuming that it was going to work with the plastic and the PVA around the edge. Should have tested it properly, or just use something else. So there was no issue whatsoever with these pump label things, because they're basically plastic, so there's nothing for the epoxy to soak into. So these are a really good option for embedding in epoxy, because you don't have to worry about that at all. So I could have maybe done more of those instead of beer mats, and combined it with, say, beer caps or something. I think that might have looked pretty cool. But like I said, I like it this way. I think some of the beer mat designs are really nice and kind of make it look quite interesting as well. And there's a lot of different colours in there as well. And the beer mats are just a bit bigger, obviously, than bottle caps and these other things. So I think they look a little bit more visually appealing, to me anyway, on here. So thanks, of course, to all the people that sent me beer mats to help with this project. Yeah, I will put your names up on the video when I've had a chance to check that I don't forget any of them, rather than just announce them right now. But you know who you are. Thanks so much. I've tried to use some of the beer mats that everyone sent to me. I didn't use all of the ones that everyone sent me, obviously, because I didn't have space, but picked out the ones that I liked, and hopefully you will have spotted a few of the ones you sent if you did do that. So yeah, the epoxy, I think maybe with the beer mats I could have tried laminating them, which is something that a couple of people have suggested, but I didn't have a laminator personally. I could have taken them to work and done it there, but never mind. So yeah, on the whole, it looks really good. I like the fact that it's got the epoxy finish on the back plate of the taps as well, and it's given it a nice kind of smooth finish up to the edge of the bar. So there's just a little lip around the edges here, but yeah, it's not enough for it to cause any problems. I think I probably could have gone for 5mm thickness on the epoxy and brought it even closer up, but some of the bits at the back here where the wood is not at the same level, the epoxy is pretty much going over the edge there, so I might have had some spillage off the back if I'd have done that. Yeah, woodworking wise, I'm very proud, to be honest, with how the woodworking went. I'm not a carpenter at all. I don't really do much woodworking. Most of the tools that you saw me use in this video, they very, very rarely come out of the boxes, so it's just the odd DIY job that they're there for. And I had to kind of work a lot of it out as I went along, but this is probably the bit that I'm kind of most proud of, is the top cabinet here. I think that's come out really nice. Using the router to do the kind of top edge on here, I'm really pleased that I did that, because I think it just makes it look a lot more well, let's not go as far as saying professional, but it looks a lot cleaner and neater with that edge on it, rather than just a squared off kind of block finish. And it's all fitted together quite nicely as well, so that whole design stage, making sure all of this would line up and level off with the drip tray and everything, it all worked really well, and it's just really shiny and glossy, which is the kind of finish that I was looking for. Yeah, so yeah, that's all good as far as I'm concerned, and let's have a look inside now and show you the inner workings. So the whole top panel here above the collar is basically attached directly to the original lid of the freezer, and it just lifts up like this. Now, I was a little bit concerned about the weight of it, but as you can see, it's definitely got a bit of heft to it, but I can do it one-handed, so it's not that bad for a puny weakling like myself. And yeah, just a short off cut of wood to prop it up is all you need. Now, you do have to be a bit careful because of the weight with lifting it up beyond the sort of 45-degree angle that it's at there, because it does start to actually bend and deform the metal on the lid at the back, because with the edges off, the metal panel on the top of the lid starts to flex. So yeah, it will knock the hinges out of line if you do that too much. But let's take you in. As you can see, I managed to do all of it and keep the interior light working, which was a benefit. I've slightly moved things around in here since you last saw it, and that was because I got a new 6 kilo tank of gas. So last time I went to the gas man, he only had 3 kilo ones because it was at the kind of peak of the CO2 shortage, so I could only get a 3 kilo, and especially when you're running something like this, that's not really going to cut the mustard. And that was about 6 months ago, so I got a good amount of usage out of it. But as expected, after tinkering around with all of this stuff and charging up my first few kegs, it pretty much ran out. I had a small leak issue as well, which I'm probably going to do a separate video on, but about how I kind of isolated and fixed that. So that's something to look forward to later on maybe. Anyway, on our gas tank, just a standard single regulator coming off of the gas tank. I've set that, well, it's currently to about 25-ish, just under 25 psi, so I'm kind of setting that at what I will use for forced carbonating. I might crank that up a little bit to 30 later on, but that will be like the maximum pressure that I want to use most of the time, that will be set to. And then on the individual secondary regulators, I can set pressures for each keg that's running off of those. So the line goes from the regulator up round to here into this one and along. So I had to shift all the regs to the left slightly, because with the bigger gas tank, it's too tall to sit it up on the shelf here. So I had to move that down to there, and then if I've got a keg up on here, and I will eventually have another one in the corner there as well. As you can see, it was a little bit tight here, and that was a couple of inches further over before, which meant there wasn't room for the 2 kegs to go in here on the shelf, so that had to shift to the left slightly. But if anything, I think it's just made it a little bit neater, because all the gas lines now kind of run a bit more flush around the edge, less stuff to get hooked up on. So it runs through the 6 secondary regulators. I've got these 5 at the back, which will run the 5 kegs again once I've got the 5th one in the corner there. So 4 which will be actually on tap, and then 1 for conditioning, and then the 6th reg over here, which also has a spare little disconnect on the end of it, which I can just use if I need to quickly gas stuff up or flush bottles or whatever. At the moment it's disconnected, but when it's hooked in, we'll run through this line, which goes out of the back of the Keezer and actually feeds into the kegerator there, which I will still be using. There's nothing in it at the moment, but my plan is to keep the kegerator and have this for kind of slightly warmer temperature stuff that I want to use, and lower kind of carbonation things. So this is going to be my kind of ale, more English ale, darker beers, porters, stouts, that sort of thing, where I want to keep them at more of a sort of cellar temperature, so probably about 11 or 12 degrees. Whereas this one, I'm going to keep it set to about 8 degrees, I think, at the moment, which is for me a nice sort of middle point between kind of lager cold and cellar temperature, where for me, I don't mind drinking lagers or kolsches like that at that sort of temperature, and it's also not so cold that it's going to kill all the flavour in IPAs and pale ales and more hoppy stuff like that. So that's where all the gas goes, and then I've got the beer lines coming down through the lid, which go obviously up into the back of the tap tower, and they are then split off into the individual lines, which you saw me putting together in the previous video, color coded and numbered. So I've not got that one hooked up to this tank at the moment, because I've just got this one force carbing at the moment. Yeah, so nice and easy to identify which one's which, and on the whole I'm pretty pleased with. I mean, obviously there's shitloads of tubes going all over the place, but it's a lot neater than I thought it would look, and it's not as difficult getting the kegs in and out of here as I thought it would be, because I've managed to keep all the tubing relatively neat and fairly short as well. So yeah, that's the internals. Again, massive thank you to Robbie Williams. Go and subscribe to his channel. He's got some really interesting stuff on there, and really knows his stuff about you know, all this sort of stuff to do with gas and beer serving and so on, because it's what he does professionally, and he helped me out hugely sourcing pretty much most of the hardware that you can see in front of you here for getting this all hooked up. So big thanks to you again, Robbie, and yeah, I owe you many pints for your help with that. So cheers, mates. Yeah, that's that. So let's just have a quick look round the back and into the tap tower, and then that's it. So around the back of the freezer, you can see we've got the Inkbird temperature controller set to 8 degrees. I've had the lid open for a while, so you can see that's warmed up a bit and it's going to need to cool down. Then the controller sockets for that mounted on the back as well, and then we've got just an extension lead there which powers the ITC unit, and there's just a USB outlet there for the LED strip. That all is set below the tap tower, which you can see has got these nice latches on the top, and then a handle here which we can use to get into the back, where it's all nicely insulated and you can see the beer lines which have come up from the bottom there, so straight onto the barbs with the John Guest fittings. And again, quite pleased with how neat and tidy that all came out. You can see there the colour coding as well again on the top, so that I can identify which lines are going where. Yeah, so not much else to see there, but that's just again, for those of you who haven't seen the previous videos, to show you how all the gubbins work on this one. I may add a little bit more insulation to this, kind of fill it in a bit, but I'm not having any problems at the moment because of any temperature differential between the top and the bottom bit. But maybe, you know, in the summertime that might be more of a problem, so but for now it's fine. So I guess that concludes the whole Keezer Build series, really. Like I said, I'm really happy with how it came out. Thanks a lot to everyone who's helped along the way with just tips, advice. Again, big shout out to Robbie especially, all of those that sent me beer mats for the top as well. And just watching the videos, really, because I've enjoyed kind of documenting the process and getting feedback from all of you too. So yeah, cheers.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know, that or his dudeness or duder or, you know, El Duderino.